what are the top 10 mistakes that business owners make who don't have legal counsel? Well, let's take a look at these. So I'm Jim Cunningham. I'm a partner at Cunningham Legal. I've been an attorney for 30 years. I am a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. And I'm a pilot. I'm a securities and insurance license, as well as a real estate broker. I'm a pilot, single engine land, instrument rated. I'm not current, but sort of a broad background, and that really helps. Also a business owner. So, right, I'm also a shareholder at Cunningham Legal. So I'm living and breathing this on a daily basis. These are the 18 lawyers now that we have at our firm, Cunningham Legal. We are devoted to all things peaceful succession or peaceful transfer of wealth from one generation to the next. And this does include business owners. So typically it's going to be a family-owned business and that we're working on, or maybe two families that own a business. But typically this is within the context of estate planning, which, if you have assets, you're going to need estate planning. And this is very important. A disclaimer: I'm a lawyer. I'm talking. We're going to be covering a lot of stuff very fast. This is not legal advice. This is really important. So we're here to provide information. We're here to educate, hopefully entertain just a little bit, because this stuff can be drier than the Sahara Desert in July. But we're going to humorous spin sometimes when appropriate, but really important. This is important. Is really this. A lot of what we're talking about should be done with a lawyer. And when I say you, there's no attorney-client relationship that's forming here. Number one, choosing the wrong entity, corporation, partnership, or LLC. So when you go to set up a business, many people say, I want to set up a business. I want to have a corporate entity, and we'll talk about why it makes sense to do that. It does protect your liability. But do you use an LLC, corporation, or partnership? This is a whole universe of what you can and cannot use. We have a lot of webinars on our YouTube page on this. For example, if you're a professional, if you're a lawyer, you cannot have a professional LLC in California. You must use a corporation. So there's certain areas where you have to use a corporation and not an LLC. If you have a corporation, it will be taxed as an S corporation or a C corporation. Right? And S corporation is typically a smaller business that doesn't pay tax at the corporate level. A C corp is like Apple or Nvidia. They pay tax at the corporate level, and those dividends, as a shareholder, you pay tax on those dividends. An LLC can be taxed as a disregarded entity, which means it does not file a separate federal income tax return, but it does file in California a state income tax return, and you report all that activity on your own 1040, your own personal income tax return. That would be an LLC, taxed as a disregarded entity. Now, this is very confusing, because LLCs can also be taxed as a partnership or as a corporation. An LLC can, let me say that again, an LLC can be taxed as a partnership but not be a partnership. Or an LLC can be taxed as a corporation. That could be an S corp or a C corp. So it really depends on what's in the LLC. I would say if real estate is in an LLC, you're typically going to see that taxed as a partnership, potentially disregarded entity as well, but you'll typically see that taxed as a partnership. Why? It's because when a person dies owning a share in a partnership, that those underlying assets in the partnership get an adjusted cost basis at death, meaning that, if you bought something for $100,000 and now it goes up to $1 million and it's in a partnership, your heirs can sell that asset for $1 million and not pay capital gains tax. So very powerful. If it is a C corp or an S corp, you do not get an adjusted cost basis on the underlying asset. So it's very important. If you bought something for $100,000, it's gone up to $1 million, and that property is in an LLC taxed as an S corp, or that real estate is in an S corp, you're not going to get an adjusted cost basis on the asset in that corporation. There are some workarounds, but just understand that's the real reason why people are using partnership versus corporation when it comes to real estate. But choosing the wrong structure can mean higher taxes or, frankly, legal exposure. You want to get upfront advice on this, especially if it's real estate. And there are some defaults. So if you create an LLC and then you don't make your certain election, you're going to have a default under state law as to how it's taxed. So it's very important to pay attention to that. I would say on this one, you're going to want to get tax advice up front. This is tax advice is going to come from typically your CPA and your business lawyer. TikTok doesn't count, by the way. It doesn't count as legal advice. Skipping the operating agreement with an LLC. So here, an LLC, an operating agreement basically is the terms and conditions of how this LLC runs. If it's you and you're a solo owner of an LLC, do you really need an operating agreement? I mean, the bank might need one if you open a bank account. But the problem is if you have more than the real problem is if you have more than one person or you have real estate that's going into an LLC. So separate issue there. But skipping the operating agreement generally is a bad idea. So if you say, hey, I'm doing this business with a friend, we're really good friends, we don't need a contract. Yeah, well, things may not always go so well, right? Someone's cousin might want to pay out. Somebody gets divorced, right? Do you really want to be partners with your partner's ex-spouse? I mean, a lot of people don't. So even friends need boundaries. Get it in writing. The operating agreement is a great thing not to miss. Mistake number 3 is not protecting intellectual property. I would say your logo, your brand, your name. This is very important, especially in the age of this age that we live in, the internet and AI. You really want to protect your intellectual property. So if your business has a name, you can trademark that. Okay, what does that trademark do? Well, that protects your name so that other people can't steal your name. So if you're investing a lot online with online marketing, trust me, you're going to want to protect that. We've protected Cunningham Legal, like the name Cunningham Legal. That's a registered trademark. So that is very, very important that intellectual property is protected. So this goes to names, taglines, whatever it is. And that's something that lawyers help with those type of things. Using Frankenstein contracts, piecing together contracts from the interweb does not end well, right? You want to have a lawyer make sure those are you got a lawyer behind those. Now, a lawyer may be able to help you write that contract. Also, there are trade associations you can get contracts from. Realtors use California Association of Realtors. But whether you're using attorney drafted, trade association, whatever it is, make sure you're using the updated version, even if it costs you $700 a year or it costs you a couple $1,000 with the lawyer, whatever it is. You're going to want to make sure and use those updated forms because the law does change, and you're held to those standards, even if you're not aware of the change in the law. So I would say Frankensteining together contracts can be scary, like Frankenstein was scary when I was a little kid and saw it. Ignoring employment laws, misclassifying employees, ignoring overtime, not paying people appropriately. Here's a little insider tip. We give every employee a personal device allowance on every paycheck. We pay them a small-ish, I mean, it's not tiny, but we pay each employee every paycheck a certain amount of money because there was a company in California that got sued because they had their employees using employees' cell phones and laptops to do work, but weren't paying them. That's an example of sort of the craziness of California law. Stay compliant, spend the money, have your employee manual updated annually, pay attention to HR, pay attention to labor laws, because in California, if a former employee successfully sues you and gets $1 in damage, you have to pay that former employee's or current employee's legal fees. So that's the biggie. EPLI, employees liability protection policy is one you can use, which is insurance against employment lawsuits, but typically it just covers, it doesn't cover the damages. It really covers just the legal fees typically. So no terms, conditions, or privacy policy. So this is actually really important to understand. If you don't have rules on your website, you're vulnerable. So websites have to be ADA compliant. And I don't want to get too heavy in the tech, but if you're running a business, you're going to have an online presence. You will be collecting user data. You will be collecting consumer data. This is names, addresses, emails, cookies, IP addresses. This requires a privacy policy, especially if you're dealing with residents of California. California is the CCPA and the CPRA, as well as the EU, which is European countries, GDPR, and that's really the heavy one and the heavyweight. Other states and countries have data laws, and if you have a website, if you have an online presence, you're going to be subject to those rules. Skipping this privacy policy can lead to really serious big daily fines and legal headaches. You want to have good terms and conditions and privacy policy and get your digital legal affairs in order. Signing a lease without a review, I would say this is a big mistake. A standard lease usually favors the landlord. A legal review can help reduce these poison causes and hidden costs. So the gotchas in there, one is like holdover. They might charge you 200% or 300% rent if you stay on the lease beyond the term. So there are a lot of gotchas in there. And certainly we're in a very soft, in most markets, a very soft office space environment, and you really can get some leverage on landlords, at least in 2025. Waiting until you're sued to get a lawyer, bad idea. So once you've been served with the lawsuit, you should have been talking to the lawyer before that. Preventative law is cheaper than emergency law. So a lot of things that people get sued on are preventable. Okay. These are things where you go, I really have to do this under, and a lot of these are labor law, quite frankly. Do I really have to do this under California labor law? The answer is there are many things that consenting adults can do in California, and the list is very long, but working through lunch is not one of them. Not taking your two 15-minute breaks or 10-minute breaks during the day is not one of them. So you have to be very mindful of California labor law because that is a big gotcha. No exit strategy on a business. So there will come a day when you will no longer be involved in your business. Either you will close the business, you will sell it, you'll give it away, you'll die, right? Someone else will have to do that. If you have no plan for exiting your business, there is going to be more chaos than if you don't have a plan. I would say plan your exit like your launch, but with legal help. So this is something that you can build into the business. In the operating agreement on the LLC, you should address what happens if people get divorced, if people go into bankruptcy. You don't want to be partners with your partner's bankruptcy creditors. So there are a long list of things where you'd want to address those. That's just sort of basic business hygiene. Not budgeting for legal fees is number 10, right? We'll just deal with legal later. That's a really bad strategy. Budgeting for legal in your business plan does make sense. It's part of doing business. And frankly, it's not that much money. I mean, I know lawyers are expensive, but setting up a business, when we look back and we kind of look at the P&L on what a business has done, many times the legal fees, there are significant savings opportunities if you invest that money in legal rather than waiting for problems to come up. So bonus tip, legal doesn't have to be astronomically expensive, just intentional. I would say preventative advice beats emergency advice every time. Why on earth would you need a business lawyer? Well, you need a business lawyer to select your entity, LLC, partnership, or corporation, legal compliance, all that stuff you have to do to maintain your business, liability management. We're going to talk quite a bit about that. Business transactions and disputes. If you're setting up contracts, signing contracts, dealing with vendors, protecting your intellectual property, very, very important. I think this has become much more important than it used to be with the internet and all the technology that's out there. Very important to protect because anyone can rip you off at any moment. So all that money you put in to build your brand, if you don't protect that, someone can just rip it off and duplicate it and really you have very less recourse than you would if you had protected it. And financial planning and tax matters, and then growing the business and succession. So those are all things where a business lawyer can really add value to a business. Let's talk about entity selection and formation. So if you're creating a business, should it be a partnership, corporation, or LLC? A partnership is like dancing the tango, as they say. It takes two to tango. If you have a partnership, two people. Could you have a partnership of LLCs? Yes. Could you be in partners with your living trust? Potentially. So a partnership, we use the term person loosely, but typically it's going to be two people or two tax-paying entities. Corporation is a separate legal entity. You can have a single shareholder. You can have millions of shareholders, right? Like a publicly traded company. It issues shares. It has bylaws. It has a requirement of an annual meeting. There's a board of directors that elects officers, and the officers serve at the pleasure of the board, and the board represents the shareholders. If that sounds horribly complicated, right? The LLC is kind of the opposite extreme. The LLC is a limited liability company. That can be 1 people. It could be 100 people. There is no requirement for an annual meeting. There's no board of directors. They're members of an LLC. You have managers of the LLC, but it's really, I mean, you can have a board of directors in an LLC, but you're not required to. With a corporation, you are required to. So different flavors. I would say partnership is the oldest one. You know, Cain and Abel, going way back, partnership. Corporation, 1600s, started out in Holland. LLC, 1977 in Wyoming. That was the first LLC. Corporations can be taxed in two ways. This is very important. A C corporation is effectively the default. And so what that means is you are taxed as a C corporation if you do not make, if you set up a corporation and you do not elect to be taxed as an S corporation, you are taxed as a C corporation. What does that mean? Well, that means the C corporation pays taxes on its profits. And then when you turn around and take those dividends, you're taxed again on the dividends. Okay. So an S corp was created 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, to say, you know, that's kind of a ripoff. Can't we just have a subchapter S corporation? So this is a provision in the Internal Revenue Code where the corporation itself doesn't pay tax, but only the shareholders pay tax at their own shareholder level. So there are different reasons why you would use a C corp versus an S corp. We did mention earlier in the webinar or in the video, qualified small business stock. That's Internal Revenue Code Section 1202 stock. That allows you to exempt capital gain on up to $10 million or 10 times your cost basis. So you don't pay federal capital gains tax on that. Pretty good deal. So that would be a reason to have a C corp where you might not, where if you have an S corp, you don't have that benefit. Most people, though, I will say for smaller operating companies, most people go with the S corp route. So that's what we see for smaller companies. Business compliance. So what is business compliance? Well, you have your articles of organization. If you're going to set up an LLC, this is the formal paperwork required at the state level to set up your LLC. Statement of information must be filed in California, must be filed within 90 days of registering the LLC with the Secretary of State. After the initial filing, they're required to submit this document every 2 years. The statement of information says who are the managers, what's their address, who's the agent for service of process. So if somebody sues the LLC, if you create the LLC, your name is on the articles of organization. If you're the manager of the LLC, your name is a matter of public record. Some people say, I don't want my name on any public filing. So if you hire our firm or another law firm, well, certainly if you hire our firm, we're the organizer. So your name won't appear there. On the statement of information, you can use a New Mexico LLC as the manager so that an LLC appears as the manager. So a little bit more level of complexity, but the bottom line is you can keep it private. It's just a slightly heavier lift, and that's something that we help clients with. So if you're into privacy, we're a good firm to use because we can keep your name. So if you're a public figure and you don't want to be out there, or you're a famous person, whatever it is, then there are ways to keep your name off that. Operating agreement is not a public record. There's no there's no reporting requirement if you have an operating agreement or not, with one exception, I will say, on real estate. But an operating agreement defines the roles and responsibilities of the members and managers, outlines the decision-making processes, and sets the rules for profit sharing among members. If you have real estate and you create an LLC and you put real estate into the LLC, which is very common for our clients to do, the assessor, the local county assessor, will want the schedule of members. So if I have a piece of property and I put it into an LLC and I own 100% of those shares, the property is not reassessed when it goes into the LLC, but the assessor is going to ask for the schedule of members. They're not going to ask for the operating agreement. They just want to know who the members are of that LLC so that they know whether to reassess the property or not. So that's a little bit of an insider tip, if you will, on dealing with real property in California and putting that property into an LLC. So very, very important. Business licenses and permits. If you're doing business, you've got to check with your local, wherever you're doing business, you have to check with your local regulations, because cities, counties have their own regulations. And then you've got your tax documents you're going to have to deal with, your tax compliance, typically with the CPA. In California, partnerships, the partnership agreement explains the management roles of each partner, detailing how responsibilities and decision-making is made. If it is a general partnership, there is no requirement to register it with California, but you can. It's optional. You can register it with California. If it's a limited partnership, you must register it. Fictitious business name statement is a required filing when a business operates under a name different than the owner's or partner's legal name. So that's very important. So if you're not operating under your legal name, then you have to register that. So if you have a partnership that is not registered with the state of California, you would have to get a fictitious business name statement in the county that you're primarily, that you're headquartered in. So that's a rule on that. And again, business licenses and permits. If you're a partnership, you're going to be subject to all the local requirements. Again, this is a reason to get a business lawyer, because if you say, gee, I'd like to do a partnership in the city of Los Angeles, you're going to be paying some taxes to the city of Los Angeles. You're going to be paying some fees. You're going to be paying a license tax. If you're a law firm in the city of Los Angeles, you have to pay a 0.5% gross receipts tax. So if your firm grosses $1 million a year, what is that, $5,000 a year, you would have to pay, even if you don't make any money, right? So that's what attorneys have to pay. Boo-hoo, attorneys have to pay that to the city of Los Angeles. Partnerships have to file a Form 1065. That's the U.S. partnership return. Each partner gets a K-1, which is the income that's reported to the K-1. So the partnership has to file a return but doesn't pay tax, and then the partners get the K-1 and the partners pay the tax on the K-1. And the California has a Form 565 that you file with the California Franchise Tax Board. So 2 filings that you've got to do, state and federal. Annual reports. So for a California partnership, some may be required to file annual periodic reports. Limited liability partnership is typically reserved primarily for lawyers. They're required to file an annual statement of information with the Secretary of State. We do have a link here on the reporting requirements for all of these, and we've got that in the notes there. So if you're like, oh, gee, I did an LLC 5 years ago and I haven't done anything on that, yeah, you probably need to check that out and make sure you're compliant. What about beyond legal counsel? An attorney does more than just provide legal advice. We're part of the team. We help develop proactive strategies, and we're here to help address unique challenges that come up in the business. It might be a sounding board, right? A board member, whatever it is. Our goal is to help your company create a lasting impact and thrive for multiple generations or not. You may be building something that you say, we're building this and in 5 years we're selling it, and we're going to do qualified small business stock, that Section 1202 stock, because I watched Jim's video. We're going to do a C Corp, and we're going to be able to walk away with a $10 million capital gain and not pay tax and save $2.3 million. It's a pretty good deal. In our firm, we handle the compliance, contracts, and negotiations so you can focus on growth and innovation. Again, also this involves estate planning. So if you're a business owner, you have a business, you really need to have your estate plan and your business integrated in a sense, or your estate plan should be addressing your business should be addressing your estate plan and your operating agreement, your buy-sell agreements, whatever it might be. And we're here as a firm, we're here to help you with your successors to build their skill set and continue on. Business succession planning is crucial for the seamless transition of your company from one generation to the next. So if you're in that place of you're in business and you say, I'm really thinking about the next generation, that's really where we shine at Cunningham Legal, and we can help you out with that if you're not already represented by an attorney. So what is business succession planning? We talked a little bit about that. It's a preparation for an eventual change in ownership. So if you're a human watching this, and I'm sure AI has already scanned it, but if you're a human watching this, we all leave this earth, right? We're here for a period of time and then we're not. People retire. People have to stop working. People sell their company. That is what we're talking about, succession planning. So you're in the business and one day you're not going to be in this role. You might not even be in the business, but really it's a creation of a process for the future transfer of leadership, ownership, and management of the business. This is retirement, incapacitation, or death, or loss of key personnel. That's another one. So if you're running a business and you have key people, you need to think about if those people go, what's the plan for those key people if they leave? What's the plan for the business? We're talking about the peaceful transfer and continuity of the business, minimizing potential disruption. And this planning helps avoid uncertainty. It helps preserve business value. If you have a really good business succession plan in place, that can be very meaningful to preserve the value of the business when you stop participating in the business and it's time for you to extract value or money from the business. Having a good succession plan increases the probability that you will be getting anything from the business, if not more. So very, very important on succession planning. There are four paths. I did not come up with this. This is Patrick Ungashik. He came up with these. These are the nicknames he gave them. There is the passer, the innie, the outie, and the squeezer. The passer is when you transfer essentially like a family-owned business to a family member. So you're passing this business on one generation to the next. The innie is transferring the business to a key employee. So it looks a little bit like the passer, but the inside transaction goes to a key employee, typically for money. So the passer is somebody who says, Johnny, you've been working in the business. You're my son. I'm going to give this business to you. That does require some estate planning, because if you got other kids, that could, you're going to have to deal with that. The innie is the inside transaction, typically to a key employer, key employees. The outie is a transfer to a third party. So this is an outside sale. This is where you get your golden parachute, you get your big chunk of change, and you go off to the beach and have your refreshing drink under palapa or something. Then there's the squeezer. The squeezer is somebody who's not passing the business to anyone. The key employee's not taking it over, and there's no outside buyer. A lot of businesses, it ends up, they just squeeze all the value they can, and then it closes, it ends. A lot of solo practitioners are like this, solo practitioner law attorneys. So if you're an attorney watching this, you're like, ooh, that sounds like me. A lot of these lawyers, they just work and they kind of wind their practice down and they close their doors. So there's nothing wrong with that being a squeezer. We're just giving it a name. So business succession planning can be really difficult for a lot of people, to put it mildly. We're here for you in the next generation when the time comes to transition your business. We can make sure there are detailed instructions for the next generation with proper business succession planning. By the way, if you're a business owner, you should document all of your processes, all of them. So it doesn't matter if you're a 2-person shop or a 10,000 person shop, right? You should be documenting, have everything written down and documented, because you may have a key employee who walks out the door with all those processes in their head. And, if it's not documented, it reduces the value of the business, quite frankly. So unlike a solo lawyer, Cunningham Legal, our firm, we offer the stability of a full service firm when it comes to estate planning and business. So we're here for you and your business over the long haul, rather than being a one-off attorney. Because this is some of the feedback we get from clients. They say, well, I've got this great attorney, but he said he's going to be retiring in a couple of years. So we're looking for a law firm we can go to, so that if we go to another attorney, that attorney won't be retiring, and we're just going to have to keep popping from solo practitioner to solo practitioner. So it's something to bear in mind as a business owner. There's nothing wrong with hiring a solo practitioner. Just bear in mind that if that person is a squeezer and kind of squeezes out the value of their practice and closes shop, you're going to have to find another lawyer. This brings us to the end of our time today. We do have offices in Northern and Southern California. We also meet virtually on Zoom, but pretty much all the meetings I have with clients are on Zoom. Very few are in person. Next up, May 1st, May Day, we have Prop 19 loopholes, how to keep your low Prop 13 taxes. This is going to be a good one. If you own real estate and you want it to go stay in the family and not get reassessed, or not get reassessed as much, very, very informative webinar. We're going to cover a lot. Share this with your friends and family, but this is going to be a biggie. So this is a very popular one, and we have some new material, some new ideas. So always kind of a moving target. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will open it up for questions. If you're watching this on YouTube, keep watching YouTube, because the next video magically is going to roll right after this one. Thanks for joining us.